So with the recent patch bringing in a wave of buffs to out of meta comps, I thought it'd be good to go through the top 5 that you can use to climb the rank ladder in TFT. This patch seems to have shifted the meta quite a bit, so if there are any interesting comps that you've been playing that I didn't mention, then let me know in the comments below. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So first up we have a Karma Reroll comp, which received by far the most buffs of the patch, with 5 units out of the 8 receiving at least 1 buff, but quite a few receiving 2 or more. The aim of this comp is to slow roll your gold at level 7 to try to 3-star Karma, and any other units you can, such as Taric, Galio and Soraka. You should look to level up to 4 at 2-1 and pre-level to 5 just before the first carousel. As the majority of your units are tier 2 and 3, you want the highest odds of hitting them each round. Your item priority for this should be the needlessly large rod, followed by tier. Any tank items you get can be put on either Galio or Taric, and any AD items you should look to create Giant Slayer. Augments you should be looking out for are Magic Wand to get a free rod and a 20% boost to your team's ability power, the Invoker specialization which gives 2 ability power per cast of an ability, and the Invoker Crest, as this will save you having to search for Rise to hit 6 Invokers. For the early game you should look out for Demacians or Invokers, as it makes it very easy to build upon going into the mid game. But you could also look at playing Bastions such as Maokai until you hit a few Invokers. If you do manage to get a good start with Demacia Invokers, you should look to transition out of Demacia around level 6 and activate 4 Invokers before leveling to 7 and slow rolling for Karma 3. Once you do hit Karma 3, you should look to hit 8 as fast as possible to activate your additional traits such as Ionia from Ari. Next up we have my favourite composition of the set, and one that I'm happy to see enter the meta again, and that is Aphelios. Aphelios used to be very strong but was nerfed along with other Gwynsuit item users such as Zeri. If you're familiar with the meta before this patch launch, this composition is very similar to the Akshan Deadeye composition, but instead it utilises Aphelios as your carry. For this comp you should be aiming to get level 7 as soon as possible, and depending on your health, either rolling down to 30 gold or all the way down to 0 to look for your core units like Aphelios, Urgot and Sejuani. Your item priority should be any AD item you can get your hands on, but ideally BF swords to give Aphelios as much AD as possible. For augments you should be on the lookout for the Deadeye crest, to allow you to activate 4 Deadeye, most likely putting this on Lysandra, the Deadeye specialization trait of suppressive fire to stun their backline, and a cut above as it gives you your core item for this composition along with a nice bonus of the chance for additional gold. For the early game, you should try to get any bruises you can along with Deadeyes, with Jhin being your item holder. If you find an early Ashe, this will be a great indicator to go for this comp, as she is a core unit for the early and mid stages of the game. Going into the mid game, you should try to slot in Lysandra to activate Freljord and another invoker such as Galio until you hit level 7 and put in your core units. Once you've stabilised at level 7, you should look to save your gold so you can start leveling to 8 and go for your final unit, which is Sion. So before we get into this next game, if you do find these guys helpful, I'd really appreciate you subscribing, as it goes a long way for making new videos. If you've watched my previous videos, then you'll have seen that I did an in-depth guide on this one, as a best comp no one else is playing. So if you want a more in-depth guide on that, including highlights for real game, then I'll leave a link in the description below for you to check it out. With this comp, your main goal is to 3-star Ekko and have him one-shot the backline whilst healing himself back to full. If you manage to do this, then it usually guarantees the top 4, but if you also manage to 3-star Katarina too, and get to 8 to cap your ward, then it's more like a first or second. As it's a 3-cost carry, you should look to stay at level 7 until you've at least 3-star Ekko before going to level 8. If you also manage to find 6 Katarinas, I'd recommend staying at 7 and rolling till you hit 3-star her as well. This comp doesn't need to go to level 8 to secure a top 4 placement. It can easily win out games at 7 with great positioning. Speaking of positioning, this will make or break this composition, as the main goal is to assassinate the backline by positioning both Ekko and Kat in front of the backline carries, so that when they dash to the backline, it will be to their main carries. Your item priority should be the Glove for Hand of Justice and Dual Gauntlets for Ekko and Kat. As we're relying on big hits, we need guaranteed crits. For augments, the best you can find is Idealism, as it gives you a free Hand of Justice and a 13% damage buff for the units holding them, which is huge for this comp. The second augment to look out for is the Rogue Specialization, as the Omnivamp is crucial for your rogues to survive, and finally Cybernetic Leech, again for the Omnivamp. In the early game, you should look out for any rogues. My go-to composition is Viego and Maokai with any other Bastion and Rogue, as this activates 3 traits right out of the gate, and then using the additional Rogue as your item holder. Transitioning into the mid-game, you want to be on the lookout for the Freljord package of Lysandra and Ashe, and look to swap out your Bastions for Bruisers ready for Sejuani at 7. Once you get Cat and Ekko, you should look to be scouting upcoming fights, and move Ekko and Cat to whichever side the enemy carries are on. If you're unsure, you should keep them in the middle for your best chance of getting the enemy carry. Next up is Ionian Challengers, which is still one of the strongest comps in the meta. This consists of 6 Ionia for the additional Enlightened unit and a mix of Challengers for the additional attack speed. Your main carry will be Yasuo, with Kai'Sa as your secondary carry for any AP items you get throughout the game. There is a spare 8th slot, which I like to use for Cassante, activating Bastion for the additional armor and MR, but you could look at replacing him with something like Heimer for the extra damage. Like the other 4-cost carry compositions in this meta, the general playstyle is to get to level 7 as soon as possible, and depending on how healthy you are, roll down to hit your core units like Yasuo and Kai'Sa. Your item priority should be BF Sword, as Edge of Night is a must for Yasuo if you want him to survive for more than 5 seconds, as he will be flying around with his ability, picking up aggro everywhere. Augments you should be looking out for are the Ionia Crest to put on Kai'Sa. If you don't get this, then you can look at replacing Cassante with Ahri or Zed. The Ionian Specialization Augment, which gives attack speed and a shield, and the Edge of Night Augment to get a free Edge of Night and additional attack speed. For the early game, you should of course be looking for 3 Ionia and an additional challenger, such as Samira, but if you can't hit 3 Ionia, then any mix of challengers with the front line of Bastions, Bruisers or Juggernauts should be okay. Use either Jhin or Samira as your item holder if you hit 3 Ionia, and use Samira as your item holder if you go with the challenger start. Transitioning into the mid-game, you should look to find Warwick as he activates both Juggernauts and additional challenger to hit 4 challengers. The final comp is one that saw some success before the patch, but was mainly overshadowed by the dominating AD comps such as Noxus, Ionian Challengers, Ekko Reroll, Slayers. The list goes on with the dominating AD comps, so it's nice to see this becoming a tier 1 composition. For this you will be activating 6 Sorcerer to shock an extra unit on each kill, and then adding in any accessory traits we can, such as the Demacia trait to give you a radiant item on looks, Strategist for the extra shield and AP, and Multicaster for the extra damage. Similarly to the last composition, you should be aiming to get to level 7 as soon as possible, and look to roll your gold to hit your core units. If you're relatively healthy and not contested, you could look at leveling to 8 first, and then roll your gold for an increased odds of tier 4 units. Your item priority should be tier to get blue buff, then needlessly large rod for any AP items you can create as your second item for looks. Any additional AP items should go on Ahri, and any tank items should be put on Jarvan. If you do pick up any AD items, then you should look to create either Giant Slayer or Hextech Gunblade. Augments you should be on the lookout for are the Sorcerer Crest, as this will allow you to replace Malzahar with something like a Bastion, such as Cassante. The Sorcerer Specialization Augment, which gives you additional mana, and the Magic Wand for a rod and extra AP. For the early game, if you can hit 3 Void with additional Bruiser, this will give you the safest journey to the mid game, as it gives you a good front line with Bruisers and Voidling, and a good start of Sorcerers in Malzahar and Vel'Koz. Transitioning into the mid game, you should look to activate 4 Sorcerer by putting in Taric and Swain, and you could even look at removing Cho for Kassadin to activate Bastion, and putting in Teemo for Renekton to activate Strategist and Multicaster. And that does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.